evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to flip through this book about Norway. And we'll read some of the little boxes and look at all the pictures. There's some really pretty ones in this book. Look how cute. Norway today. Look at this cliff in the background. Some of the amazing cliffs around the fjords. There's the Aurora Borealis, the northern lights in the sky, and this picture, very sadly, is commemorating the terrorist attack in 2011. And this is it's a refugee arrival center. That was a hostel. This is in the northern area of Norway called Kirkenes, I believe, near the Russian border. Oh, yes. Look at this cliff out in the fjords. How incredible. That must be amazing to stand on. It's so cool. Oh, here's a box about the fjords. Let's read it. Let's see. In total, there are about 1,190 fjords in Norway and the Svalbard Islands. The Sognefjord is the largest and deepest fjord in Norway and the second largest in the world. It stretches 127 miles inland from the ocean to the small village of Skjolden in the municipality of Luster. The fjord reaches a maximum depth of 4,291 feet below sea level, and the greatest depths are found in the inland parts of the fjord. Cliffs surrounding the fjord rise almost sheer from the water to heights of 3,300 feet and more. Oh gosh, Norway Fjord? I guess. A branch of the Sognefjord, particularly noted for its unspoiled nature and dramatic scenery, and only 980 feet across at its narrowest point. The fjord is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. If you're Norwegian or can speak Norwegian, tell me how to pronounce that. So I just covered Sweden in my series, and I didn't invest as much time in learning how to pronounce Norwegian because it's a lot easier to do compared to Swedish, but I didn't really deeply study it as much as I did Swedish, because Swedish was something else. Swedish was really fascinating, but Norwegian is much simpler. Let's read about the land of the midnight sun. The duration of daylight and night varies from one place to another due to the tilt of the Earth's axis and the season of the year. At the equator, there is hardly any noticeable difference between the number of hours of daylight and darkness, or between summer and winter. The farther north or south one goes, however, the greater the variation. Located as far north as it is, Norway experiences great variations in seasons and in hours of daylight and night. In the northern half of Norway, the sun does not set all summer. The area from the Arctic Circle to the North Cape is called the Land of the Midnight Sun and attracts thousands of tourists. The length of time the sun stays above the horizon declines as one goes south, but the sun never sets on Midsummer's Day and in all places north of the Arctic Circle. Even south of the Arctic Circle, summer nights are so bright that people can read their newspapers by natural light in the middle of the night. It is not unusual for Norwegians to take a walk or visit friends at 2 a.m. Norwegians say they have 2 days for every summer day, one for work and one for Hverdagslivet. Or daily life. To make up for all that daylight during summer, those who live north of the Arctic Circle will not see the sun for weeks in winter, although there is usually some daylight around midday. How pretty. The Lofoten Islands. It's a little village down there. What a sight, the long bridge connecting the islands. There goes a boat. Look how blue the water is. There's a lemming. So cute. And some cloudberries. They look so juicy. I really want to try some someday. Look at this old ancient house. Looks like a witch or a troll would live in this house, doesn't it? Like some gnarly little creature would come out of it. So cool. A Viking ship sailing around just like the ancient Vikings did. Let's read this box. Creekmen or warriors. The origin of the word Viking has long been a mystery. Some scholars believe it means creekmen, basing this on the Old Norse word vik, maybe, meaning creek or inlet. Others insist it refers to a pirating center, the Vik, in the Oslo fjord. Yet another theory is that the term originated from the Old English word wik, maybe wike, meaning warrior, maybe Vik. The Europeans whose lands were invaded by Vikings did not speculate much on the origin of the term and did not differentiate Swedish Vikings from Danish Vikings or Norwegian Vikings. They simply referred to them as men from the north, Norsemen or Northmen. A popular prayer in the 9th century was, "From the fury of the Northmen deliver us, O Lord." The early Vikings themselves identified with their local districts, calling themselves men of Hardanger or men of Vestfold. Only toward the end of the Viking Age did a concept of national identity begin to develop. Ooh, another old little house with a sod roof. That's so neat. That would be cool to live in a house like that. Literally, probably nice and chilly. St. Olaf at the Battle of Stiklestad, I assume. Really neat painting, actually. I like the details. I like the... Anyway, I'm not going to get into painting. I could go on and on, honestly, about art. Oh, this is a good story. Sabotage. There's the building we're going to talk about. There we go. Norwegians mounted many acts of resistance against the Germans. Those ranged from wearing King Haakon's the Seventh emblem to running the Shetland bus service that ferried escapees to Scotland and carried weapons, radios, and special agents back to Norway. One significant act of sabotage was the destruction of the heavy water plant, or deuterium oxide plant, at Rjukan in Telemark, Norway. Heavy water is used in building atomic bombs, and Germany needed this plant in its race against the United States to build the first atomic bomb. On February 27, 1943, 9 Norwegians climbed down a steep, icy mountainside, crossed a river, and ascended another dangerous mountain to the heavily guarded factory. Eluding German guards, they broke in, poured out the deuterium oxide, and planted explosives. 4 of the 9 remained safely hidden on the Hardanger Plateau, while the Germans mounted an extensive search for the culprits, and the others skied 250 miles to safety in Sweden. Very exciting. Now it's a museum. Surely there's a movie about that somewhere, like a Norwegian movie or something. Oh, we're not going to read about the terrorist attack. That's too depressing. Outside the parliament, this big lion was in the book we looked at yesterday. Crown Prince Haakon. I don't know how, such a hard time saying this name. Håkon, there it is, Håkon. And King Harald, the current king. The queens of Norway. Here's Queen Sonja, the current queen. Let's read about them. The queens. From 1938 to 1991, Norway was without a queen. Before 1938, there was Queen Maud, wife of Queen Håkon, yes, the 7th, who had been frail most of her life. She was the daughter of King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra of Great Britain. Crown Princess Martha, King Olaf's Swedish-born wife and the daughter of Prince Karl of Sweden and Princess Ingeborg of Denmark, subsequently assumed the duties of the Queen of Norway, but she died in 1954, before her husband succeeded to the throne. Having been without a queen since 1938, Norwegians were particularly happy when Sonja Haraldsson, a commoner, married Crown Prince Harald, and in 1991 became Norway's first Norwegian-born queen when her husband succeeded to the throne that same year. Let's see. Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway in 2013. Let's read about the Nobel Peace Prize. There's Barack Obama's Nobel Peace Prize. You can see Barack Obama. Since 1901, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee at the Nobel Institute in Oslo, which consists of 5 members appointed by the Storting, determines the winner of this prestigious award. The Nobel Peace Prize is given to, quote, the person or body who has done the most or the best work for brotherhood among nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses, end quote. Alfred Nobel, the Swedish inventor of dynamite, stipulated in his will of 1895 that the Nobel Prizes in the sciences and for literature should be awarded by Swedish scholarly institutions, but that the decision for the Peace Prize should be left to a committee appointed by the Norwegian Parliament. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee considers nominations from Norwegian peace organizations, previous winners, and various other groups. In recent years, nominations have climbed to almost 200 a year. The committee may refrain from awarding the prize altogether, it has done so 19 times, may give the prize to one person or institution, or award a joint prize. Some notable Nobel Peace Prize winners among the many have included Martin Luther King Jr. in 1964, the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, in 1965, Mother Teresa in 1979, the Dalai Lama in 1989, Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, in 1999, and former U.S. President Jimmy Carter in 2002, quote, for his decades of untiring effort to find peaceful solutions to international conflicts, to advance democracy and human rights, and to promote economic and social development, end quote. In 2009, newly elected U.S. President Barack Obama won the prize, quote, for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples, end quote. At the time, it was considered a controversial choice because he had only just taken office and it seemed premature. Another big box. I don't think we'll read this whole timeline, but it talks about women's rights in Norway and how women's rights really advanced. Let's see, Anna Rogstad. Let's find her name in here. Anna Rogstad, the first woman member of the Storting in 1911. And here's Gro Harlem Brundtland, Norway's first woman prime minister. And she did a lot of politics work as well before achieving she was Minister of the Environment, among other things. And she was re-elected in 1990. Let's see. A press conference with Erna Solberg right there. Let's see what else we have. Oh, how gorgeous. Oh, that looks so nice. So refreshing looking. I bet the air feels so good up there. And then there's an oil rig and my squeaky chair. Let's read about the naming of the oil fields. Let's see, Norwegians draw on their rich heritage of Old Norse myths and folktales to name many of their oil fields. Northwest of Stavanger is Odin, named after the famous Norse god. Frigg, named after an important Norse goddess, is on the median line between Britain and Norway. Near the Norway-Denmark divide is Valhalla, which is named for the vast hall filled with fallen warriors over which Odin presides. Troll is found northwest of Bergen. Less familiar names are Heimdall, northwest of Stavanger, named for the Old Norse god who guards the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, and Sleipnir, which is named after Odin's 8-legged horse. Heidrun, named after the goats on the roof of Valhalla, whose milk is the liquor the fallen warriors drink, lies off the Nordland county Gullfox west of the Sognefjord, is named both for a ship in Norwegian folklore that can sail as fast on land as at sea, and a horse that belongs to the giant Rogne in Old Norse myths. Oh, some Highland cattle belong here. Really cute. And a fish farm with the little fishies in there. Well, that's sad. That's seal skins. Let's not look at that. An electric car getting charged up. Kind of a common sight where I live. Along with these recycling bins for, these are for light bulbs, for glowed lamper or halogen, which I'm sure is not pronounced like that. One of the many beautiful waterfalls in the fjords. And a box about every man's right. Alle man's retten, I believe, if I remember correctly. Outdoor recreation, yes, I did. Outdoor recreation is a big part of Norwegian culture. Everyone in Norway has public right to access to any uncultivated land in the countryside. This is according to an ancient unwritten law called Alle man's retten, or every man's right. It is thought to date way back to the Viking Age. There is no law about this right, only restrictions that are outlined in the Outdoor Recreation Act. People are free to ramble through forests, hike up mountains, ski, cycle, or swim anywhere as long as no harm or disturbance is caused. This right also extends to cultivated land when it is frozen or snow-covered, but does not apply if one is using a motor vehicle or engaging in sport fishing and hunting. With this freedom comes every individual's obligation to respect the natural environment. In recent years, increased commercial development has posed a threat to the rights of access, particularly along coastal areas where homes and holiday cabins are being built. In response, the government is taking steps to safeguard the people's right to enjoy the natural landscape. Let's see. She's got beautiful straight hair, doesn't she? She looks very happy. Let's see. This is in Finnmark. Really cool up in the north. Let's read about reindeer herding, a traditional Sami occupation. Look at this beautiful, sweet reindeer. There's more than 100,000 reindeer, both domesticated and wild, in northern Norway. The life of the Sami reindeer herding nomads has a regular pattern: a long stay at a winter base where herds feed on lichen under snow and on trees, a spring migration toward the coast with a pause for calving, a search for and travel to grazing areas on peninsulas and islands during summer, and in the fall a reindeer roundup before heading back to camp. Nomadic Sami live on the Lavo, traditional skin tents. And travel on skis, the most efficient way of traversing snowy areas. Over the years, reindeer herding Sami have faced serious obstacles when their traditional migration routes have been threatened and disrupted by dams, roads, national parks, sport fishing and hunting, mining, tourism, and military bases. Pollution is also a serious threat. The Chernobyl nuclear explosion in 1986 in Ukraine affected the Sami living in Trøndelag, as they were forced to slaughter their herds due to the high level of radioactivity caused by particulate fallout blown by the winds. The Alta Kautokeino River hydroelectric project, proposed in 1970, became a major test of Sami rights. Sami environmentalists and advocates for ethnic and minority rights agitated against the dam, which would affect traditional Sami migratory routes. Despite the high level of mobilization against the project, the Storting and the Supreme Court approved it in 1982, and it was completed in 1987. The issue of land rights became a controversial issue in the 1990s. In 2005, as a result of Sami activism, the Norwegian Parliament passed the Finnmark Act. It transferred about 95% of the land and water in Finnmark to the inhabitants of the county, whether Sami or Norwegian. The Sami Parliament and the Finnmark Provincial Council have a joint responsibility to administer the region, which no longer belongs to the Norwegian state. Oh, there goes Rooster. Oh well. Immigration to the United States. Another box for us to read. From 1840 until World War I, a growing flood of immigrants left Norway for the New World. Most emigrated because of rural poverty, leaving behind them small huts that have been called starvation cottages. Many were farm laborers who were paid only a few pennies a day. Thanks, Rooster, are children of farmers whose plots were too small or infertile to support an extended family. Before the U.S. Immigration Act of 1924 restricted the flow of refugees, more than 800,000 Norwegians had migrated to the United States. In 1882 alone, 28,628 Norwegians emigrated. Uh-oh. Car alarm, okay. No other country except Ireland had larger numbers of its people moving to the United States. Most Norwegians settled in the Midwestern states, especially the farming communities of Wisconsin and Minnesota. Life in the early years was hard for these immigrants, but Norwegian language newspapers, churches, and cultural associations helped keep the communities together. Today, at least 2 private U.S. colleges have Norwegian roots: St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota, and Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. A number of private and public organizations have been founded to help Americans interested in researching their family history and lineage. Today, there are as many people of Norwegian descent living in the United States as there are Norwegians in Norway. Some 3 million Americans consider their ancestry to be completely or mainly Norwegian, and another 1.5 million claim partial Norwegian ancestry. There are also many people descended from Norwegians in Canada and Australia. And there they go, off on a big ship to the United States, most likely. Roma immigrants protesting. Please let us rent, we want to work. It's really sad what happens to those people sometimes. This lady is out hiking, enjoying the beautiful day, it looks like, up in the mountains. Or the glaciers, it says in the caption anyway. A traditional Norwegian wedding procession. They march through the town. Everyone can see the whole wedding party. Women's groups. The Kvinnegruppe is a gathering of women interested in discussing women's issues in current literature. Members are mostly professional women in their mid-20s and mid-30s, although many are homemakers and university students. The groups are not action-oriented, but serve as an outlet for women to discuss matters that concern them and to listen to other women's points of view. It is also a wonderful opportunity for interaction with like-minded women, and most members enjoy relaxing with a cup of coffee in a pleasant atmosphere. Some groups are aimed at helping immigrant women practice Norwegian and learn about women's lives in Norway. There is a Kvinnegruppe in almost every district. Women's groups are not restricted to the Kvinnegruppe. The Husmorlag is a neighborhood group of women who do projects of common interest, running preschool centers, helping the elderly, doing charity work, or learning a language. Notices of their activities are posted in community centers, churches, and neighborhood stores. That sounds lovely. Another box about the Commissioner for Children. There we go. In the 1970s, parliamentary debate on how the country could best address children's needs in a democracy where children have no vote resulted in the creation of the Children's Ombudsman, the Commissioner for Children. The Ombudsman's duties are to promote the interests of children and to monitor the conditions under which children grow up. The Ombudsman comes under the Ministry for Children and Family Affairs. The work is twofold: gathering information from all levels of society and then approaching the authorities with problems, criticisms, and proposals for change. The Ombudsman has a high public profile as the children's spokesperson on issues important to them. On a radio and television show, the Ombudsman reads out the latest cases handled and letters received from children about issues as diverse as dangerous play areas and living in families with alcoholics. Let's see what's next. Religion, the beautiful stay of churches. So awesome. Really, really gorgeous architecture. The Old Norse gods. Let's read this for sure. I love ancient mythology. The mythology of Northern Europe goes back to a time long before the Vikings. Viking poets and storytellers retold many tales often with conflicting details about the gods and goddesses who lived in a heavenly place called Asgard. Chief among the pagan gods were Odin, god of war and wisdom, Thor, the god of thunder and storms and the slayer of trolls and giants, Frey, the god of fertility and peace, Tyr, the bravest fighter among them all, and Freya, the earth goddess and patron of pleasure. Odin was the god of poetry and magic as well as war, and the early kings of Norway were fond of tracing their ancestry back to him. Odin sent young women called Valkyries to lead warriors who had died in battle to the Viking heaven Valhalla. This was a huge hall with 640 doors, each so wide that 960 Einherjar, meaning former warriors, could pass through them side by side. Odin, who had sacrificed one of his eyes in exchange for a drink from the Well of Knowledge, had 2 ravens, Hugin and Mukin. The birds set out each dawn to fly all over the world and returned every night to report on all that happened during the day. Odin's wife Frigg, the mother goddess, spun gold thread on her spinning wheel that she wove into summer clouds on her loom. Although Odin was the chief god, Thor was more popular because of his power over the weather. His symbol was the hammer, with which he made the great noise of thunder. Frey, the god of fertility and harvest, had to be appeased by the Vikings. To please Frey, they scattered bread and poured wine on the ground when they sowed their seeds. Let's see. King Olaf. Very old-looking statue over here. There we go. And another box about King Olaf, the patron saint of Norway. After the death of Olaf II, people began to recall that there had been wondrous signs during the Battle of Stiklestad, and reports of miracles occurring at Olaf's grave began to spread throughout the land. 1 year after the battle, Olaf was declared a saint. Now Norway had its own patron saint, solidifying its ties with the rest of Europe. Olaf was acknowledged as a saint throughout Europe and as far away as Constantinople. Churches were built in his honor by the hundreds, not only in Norway but also in Rome and London, where there were at least 6 built in his name. The day of his death, July 29th, became a great religious festival in the north of Europe. Even today, the date is celebrated in Trondheim with reenactments of the battle and other medieval scenes. Saint Olaf had become both a Christian martyr and a champion of national liberty. Down through the ages, his memory lives on as the symbol of a united, independent Norway. He has become the eternal King of Norway. Within 5 years of his death, 2 of Olaf's former enemies traveled to Russia and brought back his 11-year-old son Magnus to be king. The foreign rulers fled the country. After the death of St. Olaf, Christianity came to be accepted as the religion of the country. The old communal beer feasts were incorporated into the observance of holy days. The beer was now blessed, and the first cup drunk, quote, in honor of Christ and the Blessed Virgin for good years and peace, end quote. However, traces of the old beliefs were slow to disappear. Some forms of nature and ancestor worship lingered on for centuries, and there was no serious attempt to convert the Sami until the 16th century. Language. There's a Norwegian newspaper there. And here's a map that shows the language distribution. So the blue speak Nynorsk, and the orange speak Bokmål, and the gray is whatever, apparently. This is neutral. The 2 different forms of Norwegian. Let's read about runes and runic writing. That's a cool looking stone. The oldest written examples of any Germanic languages are the runic inscriptions in Scandinavia. About 3,500 runic inscriptions have been found on objects as diverse as weapons, spear blades, and brooches. The most enduring examples are runestones, solid stone slabs carved with runes and ornamental designs. Runes are angular letters that make up the ancient runic alphabet, one of the earliest forms of Germanic writing. Every rune had a special name, and these names are known through the oral traditions recorded in Anglo-Saxon manuscripts. The 24 runes of the early runic alphabet were divided into 3 groups of 8 runes each. Each group was called an 8 in Scandinavia, which is thought to mean a group of 8. Later, the runes were called Futhark, which is the word spelled by the first 6 letters. The earliest known runestones date back to 300 CE. Very little is known about the origin of runestones, but experts believe they were linked to magic and sorcery, and perhaps religious rituals. It is thought that the common material for runic inscriptions was wood, but none has survived. Surviving runestones show 2 runic alphabets. The older, used from the 3rd to the 9th centuries, had 24 letters, and the latter had only 16 letters, a simplification of the earlier alphabet. Runic inscriptions were often set within a decorated snake or dragon coil. Occasionally, other ornamental designs were used as well. Stone engravers sometimes took it upon themselves to include additional information to the commissioned text. Much of our information about the political, economic, and cultural conditions of those times come from these runestones. The stones also tell of Viking journeys as far away as Byzantium and Baghdad, as many were memorials to someone who died on the journey. It is from the pictures on these stones that we know Old Norse legends of Sigurd, the dragon slayer, and Thor, the thunder god. And onto arts. Some really interesting carvings there. The scream. So, for this artist, I'm just going to use the American English pronunciation, which is Edvard Munch, which I know isn't correct, but we're just going to go with it today, because I'd rather just do the American pronunciation than get it wrong. Edvard Munch's best-known work, which he called The Scream of Nature, but which has come to be known as Skreek, the Scream, is actually a series of 4 versions of the same scene that he made over several years, 2 rendered in tempera paints and 2 in pastels. In addition, he made numerous black and white lithograph prints of the same image. In his diary, Munch described the inspiration for the scene. One evening I was walking along a path. The city was on one side and the fjord below. I felt tired and ill. I stopped and looked out over the fjord. The sun was setting and the clouds turning blood red. I sensed a scream passing through nature. It seemed to me that I heard the scream. I painted this picture, painted the clouds as actual blood. The color shrieked. This became the scream. The iconic image has since been copied, referenced, and parodied in all forms of popular culture, including an episode of The Simpsons. In 1994, on opening day of the 1994 Winter Olympics in Lillehammer, Norway, 2 men broke into the National Gallery in Oslo and stole its version of the scream. In its place, they left a note reading, "Thanks for the poor security." The painting was recovered later that year. In August 2004, the other painted version was stolen from the Munch Museum in Oslo, along with another Munch painting, Madonna. The Munch Museum was subsequently closed in order to revamp and beef up its security. In 2006, Norwegian police announced that they recovered both the Scream and Madonna, but would not reveal the details of the operation. 6 suspects went on trial, and 3 were convicted for the roles they had played in the theft. In 2008, after repairs were made to the stolen and somewhat damaged artworks, they were again put on exhibit. Meanwhile, in 2012, one of the pastel versions of the Scream was sold at auction for a record price of nearly $120 million. Edvard Grieg, which I believe is how you say his name. Apologies if I got that wrong. Norway's most famous composer, and indeed one of Norway's greatest and most beloved historical figures, is Edvard Grieg. Grieg did not write symphonies, but he did take on large projects. He is most acclaimed for his Peer Gynt suites, the music for Henrik Ibsen's 1867 play. Peer Gynt, which I believe how you say that, which is based on a Norwegian fairy tale. Anyway, the suites include the famous pieces In the Hall of the Mountain King and Morning Mood, which is dun 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 dun, and then anyway, which, because they are frequently heard in popular culture, are familiar to many people who don't even realize the origins of the music. Both pieces and others from the Peer Gynt suite are so iconic today as to be almost synonymous with Norway itself. Grieg is also known for his piano sonatas, 10 volumes of lyrical pieces inspired by the poems of Henrik Ibsen and Arne Garborg. Grieg, who also wrote Norwegian folk songs and music for Norwegian dances, is equally well known in Norway for a little rubber frog that he kept in his pocket. It is believed that by rubbing its rough, textured back before a concert, he calmed his nerves. The frog is part of the permanent Grieg exhibit at the composer's home. And some famous Norwegian writers. We have Henrik Ibsen. The work of Henrik Ibsen revolutionized theater. His plays aroused enormous criticism, but people flocked to see them. James Joyce, the great Irish writer, was so enamored with Ibsen's plays that he taught himself Norwegian in order to study them. That sounds very James Joyce of him. A strong supporter of women's rights, Ibsen is known for creating many great female characters, such as Nora in A Doll's House, which is about women's liberation and the hypocrisy of marriage. Ibsen's major plays are set in Norway, with a recognizably Norwegian landscape, but his characters and themes have universal significance. Ibsen portrayed people as they are. His characters struggle with problems that society of their time was afraid to mention, such as marital discord and illegitimacy. Over the course of 50 years, Ibsen published 25 plays and a volume of poetry. His plays are still regularly performed today. And here's Sigrid Undset, the Nobel laureate. In 1928, another Norwegian writer, Sigrid Undset, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for her long historical novel Kristin Lavransdatter, set in 13th century Norway. Undset, considered Norway's greatest women writer, was taught the Old Norse sagas and Scandinavian folk songs at an early age by her archaeologist father. Undset's novels provide insight into women's lives not found elsewhere in Norwegian fiction. Her early novels centered on the lives of ordinary working women and how they dealt with conflicts between personal needs and ambitions and family responsibilities. During the 1930s, Undset wrote vehemently against the rise of Nazism in Germany, which put her on the Nazis' most wanted list. When the Nazis occupied Norway, Undset escaped to Sweden, then made her way across Siberia to Japan, and then to the United States. She spent the war years actively working for the Norwegian government in exile. After the war, she returned to her home in Lillehammer and died 4 years later. Oh, can't turn the page. There we go. Rusemoling, the decorative folk painting of Norway. Rusemoling, the decorative folk painting of Norway, is a distinctive folk art that incorporates flowery ornamentation, scrollwork, and flowing patterns. It originated in the rural lowland areas of eastern Norway around 1750 and was popular there for about a century. As rural painters began copying the style, regional differences emerged, with the Telemark, Hallingdal, and Rogaland styles becoming the main forms. Artisans used colorful rusemoling designs to decorate household objects, furniture, walls, and even clothing. While most designs feature stylized flowers, leaves, and vines, in some cases alphabet letters and figures of people are included. One thing that is almost never seen in rusemoling is a straight line. When Norwegian immigrants traveled to America in the 19th century, they often carried their belongings in beautifully rusemolded trunks. These pretty objects created new interest in the folk art and launched a revival of rusemoling in the United States. Today, rusemoling is taught in many places in the United States, especially those with large Norwegian communities. The Vesterheim Norwegian American Museum in Decorah, Iowa, is known for its large collection of both Norwegian and American Rosenmold objects. It offers classes and holds, I assume, and holds an annual national Rosenmolding competition. Oh, goodness. I was about to say there's a lot of boxes in this book, but here's another one about the Sami artistic traditions. Folk dress. The only district where folk dress is still worn daily as well as for holidays is Samiland. In the winter, the Sami who inhabit the area that used to be Lapland wear fur on their heads and bodies right to their feet. But in the summer, they wear their most colorful traditional clothing. This has fabric patterned with delicate embroidery around the throat and shoulders. Samis often wear beautiful belts woven in bright colors. The yoik. An old Sami form of musical expression is the yoik, a type of yodeling. Is it yoik? I've always said yoik. Yoik. Anyway, traditionally the yoik imitates animals such as the wolf, reindeer, and long-tailed duck. A yoik can also tell an ancient Sami myth or serve as a commentary on current events. The most popular forms of yoik are character sketches of individuals that can be changed as the person changes. A Sami does not write his or her own yoik, and once one is written about a person, it is customary to regard it as belonging to that person. The memory of deceased persons is kept alive by reciting their yoik. In traditional religious ceremonies, the yoik was used to help the shaman, a religious figure who performs a priest-like role, enter a trance while beating a drum. During the Norwegianization process, the yoik and drumming were outlawed. Today, Sami revitalization has evoked a renewed interest in the yoik tradition, and it has acquired value as an important cultural symbol. In recent years, one yoik made it to the top of the Norwegian hit parade. Awesome. What's next? Leisure. They're out cross-country skiing in the snow. Norway and the Olympics. Let's read about this. Norway has twice hosted the Winter Olympic Games, the 1952 Games in Oslo and the 1994 Games in Lillehammer. The first time in Oslo, the home country advantage paid off, with Norway ranking number 1. At Lillehammer, which was a much larger competition, Norway won the most medals, but came in second to Russia in the ranking because the Russians won 11 gold medals to Norway's 10. Norway bid for the 2018 Olympics but lost to Pyeongchang, South Korea. Norway tried again for the 2022 Olympics but ended up withdrawing its bid, as did Stockholm, Sweden, Lviv, Ukraine, and Krakow, Poland. The expense of hosting the Games, as well as disagreements with the International Olympic Committee, made Norway think twice. However, the country will certainly participate in those Olympic Games in any event. In the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, Norway won 26 medals, including 11 gold. Marit Bjorgen won 3 gold, making her one of the 3 most medaled women in Winter Olympic history. And of those 3, the one with the most gold medals. One of the men, Ola Einar Bjorndalen, nicknamed the King of Biathlon, won 2 gold medals in his sport. He is the most medaled athlete in the history of the Winter Olympics. I wonder where the next Winter Olympics are. I don't remember. Ice skating out on the frozen lake. This is Greta Weitz, I'm not sure. But she's a really famous runner. She runs a lot of famous marathons. Another box, but let's see this old engraving. It's the Fram, isn't that Roald Amundson's ship? I believe the square is about Roald Amundsen. Trying to scan it. Let's just read it and find out. Planting the Norwegian flag at the South Pole. After months of preparation, Roald Amundsen was just about to set out in Nansen's Fram for the North Pole when news that American Robert Peary had reached it reverberated around the world. Amundsen immediately changed his course for Antarctica and the South Pole, determined to reach it ahead of the British expedition headed by Robert Scott. At the Bay of Whales in the Ross Sea, Amundsen set out overland with 4 men and 52 dogs. One of the 4 men was Olaf Bjaaland, a skiing champion from Morgedal, who was given the task of making sure the skis and sleds were in top condition all the time. On December 14th, 1911, the Norwegian group reached the South Pole and planted the Norwegian flag on King Haakon VII's plateau. This was the expedition that made Roald Amundsen a household name around the world. 5 weeks later, Robert Scott arrived at the pole to find the Norwegian flag and Amundsen's tent. Amundsen died in 1928 while attempting to rescue Umberto Nobile, an explorer whose airship had crashed while attempting to fly over the North Pole. At a memorial service for Amundsen, who was buried in the Arctic, Fridtjof Nansen said that Amundsen had returned, or quote, returned to the expanses of the Arctic Ocean, where his life's work lay, end quote. And here's Thor Heyerdahl on the Kon-Tiki, which is a raft that he built and sailed across almost the entire Pacific Ocean. Really cool adventure. All dressed up for Constitution Day on May 17th. Like their big holiday. Children's Parade on Constitution Day. And a Midsummer's Bonfire. Very, very own tradition. The food chapter, my favorite. Look at all the seafood. I'm like insane about seafood. I love like crustaceans, fish, all kinds of things. Some open-faced sandwiches, pretty staple diet in Norway. Pretty much eaten by everybody for like lunch or snack time. And a smorgasbord. Looks really yummy. This is a holiday lefsia. I don't know what it is. Let's see, lefsia. Oh, it's lutefisk. I guess it's like lutefisk in like a flatbread. Yum, that sounds kind of good actually. Let's read about a little piece of Norway. From hot chocolate to candy bars, chocolate is a Norwegian passion. Every Norwegian consumes on average 17.6 pounds of chocolate a year. Half of this is produced by Freia. I assume that's how you say it. Freia is Norway's most famous chocolate factory, immortalized in Roald Dahl's enormously popular book and movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Freia had its beginnings in 1892 and founder Johan Throne Holst, with his brother and brother-in-law, bought a small chocolate factory in Rådaløkka district in Oslo. Freia, which is still located in Rådaløkka, is one of Norway's great success stories. One of every 2 chocolate bars sold in Norway is made by Freia, and the company also exports chocolates all over the world. Its motto is "A little piece of Norway." Over the years, the company has contributed more than just chocolate to Norwegian society. Freia gained an early endorsement by famous Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen. After his return from his 1911 South Pole expedition, he said that Freia chocolate was one of his team's main sources of nourishment during the grueling journey. In 1920, Freia created Freia Park, one of Oslo's finest parks, exhibiting the works of European sculptors, including Norwegian Gustav Vigeland. In 1922, Freia invited Norwegian artist Edvard Munch to decorate its employees' lunchroom. The company still exhibits those paintings today. And in 1934, Freia Hall, home of the Oslo Philharmonic Orchestra, was opened. Today, the company is owned by Mondelez International, the former Kraft Foods Inc. Tours of the chocolate factory, called Freiland, is a favorite activity for school groups and tourists. Sounds like Ghirardelli chocolate that we have here in the city. Aquavits, the national drink of Norway. Their version of vodka, basically, from what I understand. Ooh, Norwegian food. Look at this fish gratin. That sounds amazing. Gotta find this somewhere to eat. And royalty cake or almond tart. That sounds good too. And that is the end of our book. So let's close out this long, really relaxing video. Made me sleepy. I don't know about you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. Let me know what you learned. And I hope that you have a